Hi friends, welcome to another video. I hope you've been doing well. 2025 was my first year working full-time on my art and small business, and although it's now 2026, I wanted to share how it went. Let's get right into it because I think this is going to be a long video. I'm also reading from a script so I don't forget anything. It's my first time doing it, so I hope it's not too distracting and you don't mind. This video will be split up into 4 sections. 1. Context. 2. A month-by-month snapshot of 2025. 3. Statistics and insights. And 4. Reflections and goals I have for this year. You can check out the chapters below if you want to jump around in the video. Let's go. I quit my full-time job in October of 2024. I had actually just started a new job only 4 months prior, and before that I was working full-time elsewhere. Both jobs were in a corporate environment in an office-like setting. Before I quit, I tried to save up as much money as I could, even before I knew I was going to leave. And honestly, I didn't really plan on leaving at a certain time. I actually wanted to work full-time a little longer to save more money and hit some financial goals. But my mental health was not great, and all of my negative emotions accumulated into a very low point. Part of why I had actually just started a new job was because I thought that working somewhere else would improve my mental health and make me feel better, like the change of environment would maybe lift my mood, but I quickly found out that it didn't. And honestly, I had never felt fulfilled at any of my jobs, even the previous ones, nor like I was really making a positive difference in the world with my work. I felt like I was just wasting majority of my day doing something I didn't really care about, so I decided to quit and pursue my passion, as most people advise against. I'm very fortunate because my partner was extremely understanding and had been encouraging me to focus on my art practice for a while now. While I was working full-time, I was still trying my best to work on my art, and I was making progress, but it was very slow because I didn't have the energy for it after a full day of work. And my mood was just so low that, I didn't really feel like doing anything. My partner was very accepting of me quitting, and he continues to support me as much as he can even now. Of course, I know how privileged of a position this is to be able to just quit my job. It's not something that everyone can do, so I definitely don't take that for granted. But where was my art practice and small business when I quit? If you've watched my videos before, you'll know that my first shop, the Honey Mustard Club, wasn't doing so great, and I'm currently giving it a makeover, which you can see the whole process on here on YouTube. Anyway, it was an Etsy shop that I started in 2020, which was getting occasional orders here and there. I also have another self-named online store, Abracadabra. I started it in 2023 and it was doing pretty well. Since I sold fan art on Etsy, I was getting flagged for a lot of copyright stuff, so I had to close it. I still have my own website for Abracadabra, but it barely gets any orders now because honestly, I have no idea how to drive traffic to my store, and there's been so many shipping hurdles that have popped up over the past few years that I just have yet to jump over. So in terms of online presence, I think I had about 800 Instagram followers and around 1400 YouTube subscribers. I have other social media, but I don't really count those because all I do on them are just lurk and repost my own content, so I don't really count those. To sum it up, I was basically making no income from my art apart from the occasional online sale, really just pocket change that I would put back into my business. I was very, very delusional into thinking that I could just quit my job and pursue art full time, and I knew that at the time as well. So my plan was actually to only take a month off to focus on my art and then find employment again, but that turned into 3 months and then 6 months and then now a full year. I've made a lot of mistakes and it wasn't an easy journey. In fact, it's still pretty hard and it's definitely still not easy. So although I quit my job in October of 2024, we're starting in January 2025 because the rest of that year was really just for resting, resetting myself, trying to get myself back together, and also trying to figure out what I was doing with my life. At the end of November in 2024, I got accepted into my first artist alley, which will be happening at the end of January. It would be my first time physically selling my art and tabling at any sort of event. So I created a 5-part YouTube series documenting all my preparations. I wanted my table display and market debut to be something really memorable, so I spent most of December and January working on it. Personally, I don't think I could have asked for a better debut event despite all the drama that came later. The sales I made at this market set a very high bar for my future markets, which I actually didn't end up beating the revenue of this market until the second half of 2025. It also helped me obtain my first 1,000 Instagram followers, which felt nice. We also got our cat Teddy at the start of this month, and yes, that's more of a personal life update, but I did feature him in a lot of my videos and I still miss him to this day. Unfortunately, my next confirmed event would be in May. Since I had a lot of time to prepare, I thought it would be good to focus on the Honey Mustard Club. During this time, I had a brand new idea and direction I wanted to take it in, so I spent a lot of time designing a new collection. Unfortunately, I ended up hating it and scrapping the whole idea. I was going through a creative block and questioning my identity as an artist. I also applied for self-employment assistance, which is a program run by Workforce Australia that provides business mentoring and allowance for small business owners. I was really hoping I could use the allowance to cover my rent, to be honest. The program also involved obtaining a certificate as well as attending weekly online classes and doing assignments, that kind of thing. To be honest, it took up a lot of time. I enrolled into the program and began my classes. I even turned in, I think, 2 or 3 assignments, only to find out that my allowance application was rejected. So I dropped out of it because I didn't really think it was really relevant to what I wanted to do. I also applied for a shelf rental at a retail store in another state that sold Artist Alley merch. A few other notable things: I set up Xero, I had a small shop update, tried air dry clay, and created an Artist Alley portfolio for my applications. March was really a continuation of February, though notably I created a new setup for my next market. I also tried out social media scheduling, but I couldn't keep up with it. I sent my products to be stocked at the retail store I mentioned earlier, and I got accepted into another market, which was just 1 month away. I spent majority of April preparing for a small university art market, and I didn't expect to make much, but it actually ended up being pretty good and exceeding my expectations. This is also the only time I have ever had a half table at a market. After this market, I focused on preparing for Momo Art Mart. I also had my first ever collaboration thanks to being part of Momo, which I'm still really thankful for. Other notable things: my partner got me a laser engraver, and I decided to completely restart the Honey Mustard Club from scratch because I was so unhappy with it. Momo Art Mart took up most of my time in May. This was such a successful and wholesome market. I felt that I was slowly becoming part of the artist community in Sydney. I also got accepted into the biggest event of the year, for me anyway, and the company I buy my sticker paper from sent me some free samples, which was a small gesture, but it made me feel like I was building my reputation as an artist. This is also the month that I decided to try another shelf rental, this time for a store in my own state. So I focused on improving my branding for retail as much as possible. May unfortunately also marked the start of the lowest periods of this year, when my business account went into negative numbers after a bill was debited, and it was the first time I had ever been really stressed about money. I did a big restock in June in anticipation of my next market, and I was stocked in 2 retail stores, one of which had a huge monthly rental fee. I was not breaking even. My savings were dwindling. I probably should have started searching for part-time jobs at this point, but nothing really landed. I pushed forward and continued working, knowing that I had to make as much as possible in my next market. I remember spending like over 30 hours drawing a new fan art print, only to be so frustrated with it that I just threw it out. I pushed through and ended up creating a new collection in my shop, probably my favorite collection that I have so far, which is the first series in Field Notes of Fiction. It was also the month that my YouTube channel could apply to be monetized, so I signed up for that as soon as possible. I started testing an inventory system that my friend designed so I could keep track of my stock properly. Sadly, we also said goodbye to Teddy, who passed away during this month. It got me really down. His passing, along with all of the financial issues, made June the most emotionally taxing month of 2025 for me. So July was the month of Smash, which was my biggest and most anticipated event of the year. I came up with a completely new table setup, which marked a rebranding of Abracadabra into like a cute medieval cottagecore fantasy type of aesthetic. Smash was my best event by far. It finally dethroned my debut market back in January in terms of revenue. I exceeded my sales goals, my new collection was a hit, and I had so much wonderful support from my loved ones, audience, and fellow artists. This is also the month that we got little Cocoa Bean. Overall, I felt happy, content, and it felt like things were finally looking up. Unfortunately, I got a little too loose with my spending after such a successful market, and I had my second financially charged emotional breakdown. Clearly, I had not learned. August was the craziest month for me. At the beginning of the year, I was afraid that I wouldn't have enough events lined up, so I applied for every Sydney art market close to my niche that I came across. That's how I ended up with 3 markets during August. And I know some artists do markets on a weekly basis, but my experience with markets so far was that they required a huge amount of preparation and resources. I felt that only specific art markets and conventions were worth my time as opposed to general markets, and I was still figuring out which ones those were. This was the month I settled into a routine when preparing for events. I was no longer drastically changing my setup. I didn't feel obligated to just keep releasing new items for every event. I had 2 one-day markets at the start of August, and unfortunately they turned out to be my lowest revenue events at the time. Thankfully I still broke even though. My 3rd market in the second half of August turned out to be a much needed pick-me-up after that, and during August I created my magical bookmark collection. September was mainly about Oz Comic Con, which is another big pop culture convention here in Australia. I specifically went to the Sydney one. I created series 2 of my field notes of fiction, which was a hit, I'm very glad to say, and this event ended up being my second best. I felt very much integrated into the artist community by now and felt more like a real small business / artist. I started working on a website rebrand and shop update for Abracadabra. This was also the month I was approached for my first ever YouTube sponsorship. I had to pinch myself because part of me kept thinking it was a scam. Like, even after I received the money, I kept thinking like, oh my god, they're gonna want the money back because the video is not gonna get views. But it wasn't a scam. And I was very excited. In October, I felt like so many things were finally picking up speed, but at the same time, I was also starting to doubt myself a lot and wondering again if I was doing the right thing. I don't think it was the case, but for some reason I felt like I was hitting a plateau with my progress. Honestly, I think it was because I was getting rejected a lot from art markets around this time, and I had started comparing myself to a lot of other artists. The biggest hit to my ego was not getting accepted into Smash Chibi, even though I had been waitlisted and accepted into the main Smash a few months ago. So I spent a lot of time just wondering like if I did something wrong or if I had offended someone, and also just trying to figure out why I wasn't getting into events. It was also the 1-year anniversary of me leaving my full-time job, and since we were coming to the end of 2025, I was getting really introspective and anxious for the next year. Other things that were notable: I tabled at a small market, released a shop update with my new branding, and published my first ever YouTube sponsored video. I also got sent some new markers to try out, which was very cool. I felt like a real YouTuber around this time. I also removed my stock from retail stores since they weren't doing as well as I had hoped, and I was just losing a lot of money each month. We also got a second cat, Nimbus. November featured my last 2 markets of the year, a casual Sunday market and the largely anticipated second Momo Art Mart of 2025, which was going to be 3 days instead of 2. At this point, I was starting to procrastinate a lot on market prep in favor of creating more YouTube videos. I pulled an all-nighter for the first time in years. I think the last time I did that was university. I literally finished my new products on the first day of the market before setting up. I just did not sleep. And despite such a big event, I didn't have as much help as usual, so I was exhausted for the entirety of the market and survived mainly on adrenaline. But this market blew my expectations out of the water and ended up being my 3rd best event. I was so surprised at how much better this market went for me compared to the first time I did it back in May. I'd like to think that part of the reason for that was because of all the experience I had accumulated since then. I was happy to end my market year on such a wonderful event. It also helped me reach 2,000 followers on Instagram. After that, I focused on editing and publishing YouTube videos that were in my backlog and continued to work on the Honey Mustard Club reset. In December, I was starting to get really bored of editing YouTube videos, so I lost most of my focus as everyone was also winding down for the holiday period. It didn't help that I was planning the year ahead and getting really excited about future projects, so I lost all passion for editing, but somehow still managed to get through most of my backlog. I also worked on rebranding both my shops, and that was my 2025 year. Okay, so before we move on to the next part of the video, I actually wanted to show you something that I've been working on since December that I regularly come back to. This is pretty much my business brain laid out in one place. I made this mind map in Kiddle, who are kindly sponsoring this part of the video. Kiddle is an easy-to-use design platform for brands and creators. With no downloads necessary, it's all just in your browser. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I use them a lot in my small business practice, usually for creating social media posts and branding assets like website banners, logos, and business cards. Something else I actually find it very useful for is brainstorming because of the way it utilizes artboards and vector graphics. When I was creating branding for the Honey Mustard Club, you can see that I had a lot of different artboards grouped together. I love that you can just move them freely, duplicate them, and resize them to your needs. Working with Kiddle, I've discovered that the best way I work is actually by making changes and design choices while looking at the big picture, just so I can see how everything looks together. Kiddle makes that easy because I don't have to keep switching view modes to edit like I do in other softwares. Anyway, back to this brainstorm I created. This is my entire business plan in one living document. I know it looks really tiny, but it's because I wanted to make sure I have room to add more as my business grows. As I mentioned, Kiddle also uses vector graphics, so all the assets I create with Kiddle look good regardless of their size. Practically, think of creating like one logo that looks good for any size project, instead of creating multiple versions and dealing with things like pixelation and blurriness, which is what I had to deal with a lot before I started using Kiddle. For this case, I decided to make my text super small so I can have more space to expand. I can just zoom in on it and it's really readable. As you can see, the document is split up into my two brands. I come back to this very often, and if you struggle to organize your thoughts or you have way too many ideas, I think creating something like this could be useful for you so you can see which direction you're going in and also note down other opportunities that you might want to explore in the future, which is exactly what I've done here. If you want to make one of these for yourself and see what else Kiddle can do for you, you can check out the link in the description and even use the code DEBYT for 25% off on the first month of all Kiddle plans for new users. We will definitely be coming back to this document in part 4 of the video, so make sure you stick around. Thank you once again, Kiddle, for sponsoring this video. Welcome to the 4th part of the video, which is the statistics and insights. If you've just skipped to this part of the video, hello, I'm so glad you could join us today. Welcome to the video. Let's talk about it. To be honest, I feel quite vulnerable sharing this, but I really hope that it can be insightful for others who are also just starting, and also something for me to look back on later in my journey. More often than not, I think we tend to see success stories where it seems like small businesses are growing super fast and expanding really quickly, making so much money. However, I don't believe this is the norm for most, and it definitely isn't for me. So regardless of how you did this year, if you're also starting a small business or your experiences with something similar, this is just my personal journey so far, and I hope you can use it as a source of encouragement and inspiration. I have documented 2,264 hours, 31 minutes, and 20 seconds of work in 2025. This is how it was split. If I was working every single weekday in 2025, so 261 days, that would average about 8.7 hours per day, not including breaks. What did I spend all of my time on this year? Anything in the biggest category would have included making new art, updating my online shop, packing orders, but the bulk of it would have been markets. I've always struggled with growing an online audience and bringing customers to my online store, so I decided that I would try and get into as many local art markets as possible and see how my products would do offline and in the real world. I applied to table at 16 markets in 2025. Please note I'm not including any markets already scheduled for this year, 2026. These numbers are just for 2025. Of those 16 markets, I was rejected from 4 markets, waitlisted for 2, and accepted into 10. I got off the waitlist for one event, another event was cancelled, and another event approached me and asked me to table for them, so I ended up doing 11 markets in 2025. It took me more than a few events to set up my Score account and settings the way I like, so I tried my best to guesstimate the statistics, but they are definitely not as accurate as I'd like, but hopefully they are still helpful and you can kind of see the big picture. I had a little over 1,560 transactions. I didn't record the cash sales from my first few events in Square, so this is pretty much just an estimate. I also didn't know how categories and discounts worked in Square at the start, but I think I sold around 3,450 items this year at markets. I had 1,285 customers according to Square. The top 3 markets that made the most revenue for me this year were Smash in July, Oz Comic Con Sydney in September, and Momoland Momo Art Mart in November. I paid $2,694 in table fees. Overall bestsellers in terms of quantity, I'll put them up on the screen here. I do also want to note that these bestsellers are items I had before I started tabling. My new collections definitely feel more popular now, but I introduced them in the second half of 2025, so I didn't sell as many. If you want to know more about the statistics for a specific market, I most likely have a vlog about it on my channel, which includes a recap and more detailed statistics. The social media category would have involved scheduling social media content and making posts, but most of this time involves filming and editing YouTube videos, which is what I want to talk about. Here are my stats for 2025 YouTube. I made 14 shorts and 21 long-form videos. Of those 21 videos, 14 of them were about markets. I gained about 1.3k subscribers and received 58.5k views. I got monetized in July. I did 2 sponsored videos and 1 collaboration video. I've enjoyed creating YouTube videos for a long time. Before I made art vlogs, I just did vlogs of like my daily life and adventures and stuff. They weren't very good. All of them have been archive now, but it is something that I want to mention because you can't really see the full story on my channel. My first YouTube vlog was in 2016 and I would be very sporadic about uploading because it was really just a hobby. I didn't really experience any growth until 2023, and then it's been slowly growing until now. Not like a crazy explosive amount of growth. I like that it's kind of just slow and steady as opposed to going viral, because it means I can get to know people who watch my videos and interact with them. It feels more like I'm making new friends. So thank you so much for making that possible for me. I really appreciate you being here with me and following my journey. So majority of my time for 2025 was spent on those two areas. However, I do want to mention a few more things from this year. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of stats for these, but there were things that I tried or played a part in my small business venture. I mentioned earlier that I tried stocking my items at 2 retail stores but ended up losing money in rental fees. One was Incubator in Victoria. I was first stocked at their Fitzroy store and then their MC store. That was from March to September, I think. I only sold 176 items. Unfortunately, I lost money here, which is why I pulled out of it. Rental fees ended up costing 2.2k and I think I only made like 1.5. I think I did badly because I honestly barely promoted it. Incubator is interstate to me and I almost never sent restocks because I was so preoccupied with restocking for markets instead. I also don't think I got a good placement. I initially applied for their MC store, but they offered me a Fitzroy position to move me up the waitlist because it was like a 1-year waitlist. And when my products were finally stocked at MC, they were on the lowest grid at the bottom, not very visible at all, and just very small amount of space. The second store I tried to stock at was Isekai Gacha in Sydney. I was there from May to September. I only sold 15 items, which just makes me laugh. I think it's because I did a terrible job setting up my cube for the first few months. I ended up moving to a different cube later, which did a lot better. But in the end, I decided to pull out because I was struggling to put time into it. They also have some issues which make it challenging. I've heard from other artists that their communication isn't very great. And the store is located on the 4th floor of an old building in the city where the lift is constantly broken. So I don't think it receives that much traffic. Thankfully, I was able to make a bit of profit from this one because the rental fee is really low compared to Incubator, but nothing too significant. I think I only made like $67 after rental fees. I also have 2 online shops that are kind of just sitting there. I don't really market them, to be honest. I'm finding shipping to be very difficult to deal with. I just don't know how to lower my shipping prices, but I ended up selling 138 items, which for something very passive, I guess it's okay. I think I debuted 57 products in 2025. If that number seems high, it's literally just because a lot of the designs were reused for different products. I'm not making like that many different designs in a year. I also retired a bunch of products, including some that I made in the same year when I found the direction I wanted the brand to go in. I also gained about 1.1k Instagram followers, and honestly, most of them is just from doing markets. I'm sure you're wondering what the grand total is for how much I made in 2025. Please, let's keep this a judgment-free zone because once again I feel a bit vulnerable sharing the numbers, but here it is. So from commissions and custom sales I made $362. From YouTube I made $465.64. From my online stores I made $1,400.61. From my retail ventures, I made $1,726.81, and from markets, I made $26,116.33. So all of that adds up to $30,071.39. Please keep in mind, this is before business expenses like table fees, subscriptions, materials, market setup, manufacturing, rental fees for the retail stores, etc., which probably ate like half of that, honestly. Just know that I could probably make more from a part-time job working way less hours. Personally, I'm happy with this number for my first year, and as mentioned, I really hope it gives a more realistic perspective and encouragement. As much as I'd love to be one of those people that makes 6 figures in my first year going full-time on my business, I feel like I've had so much growth and progress in 2025, which I'm very content with, and I'm very excited to see what this year will bring. With that, let's move on to the last part of the video and talk about my 2025 reflections and my 2026 goals. I think the big challenge that I faced in 2025 was organizing my time, especially when I had multiple projects or deadlines happening at the same time. I struggled to prioritize what was necessary, and I'm still dealing with this issue. Things just take so much time and so much longer than I think. Tying into that, I know I have a lot of ideas, and with those ideas come passion and excitement. I really learned last year that you can't use passion to motivate yourself. There were so many times I would get halfway through a project and then just get bored. Like, I just want to move on to the next thing, the next project. But I also knew that if I abandoned that task, it would never get done. I really had to push myself to finish everything I started, which is where I think discipline played a big part. In my opinion, it's better to finish something to a good standard, even if it isn't perfect, rather than not have it done at all. To help with my time management this year, I'd really like to find ways to make my workflows and processes more efficient, whether that is changing my physical or digital workspaces, upgrading my equipment, learning how to make presets, or finding new programs that can do things faster. Time is a really valuable asset. Another challenge I've faced is the deterioration of my health, not just as I get older, but because of all the stress and work that comes with trying to run a business full time and being an artist where your creativity ebbs and flows unpredictably, just like your income. Don't think this one needs an explanation, but definitely a lot of bad eating habits, terrible sleeping, and lack of physical exercise. For sure, something I want to improve this year. I think this other challenge is kind of interesting, but the third one I want to talk about is my financial habits, trying to be more frugal and what that entails. There's obviously things you can do like reining in unnecessary spending. I didn't really feel that as deeply because of my partner who likes to shower me in gifts and everything, but obviously my bank account took a few hits, as I mentioned in the first part of the video, and it was very stressful. I also wasn't able to manufacture many things, so I had to go back to creating things in my studio and not offer things like acrylic keychains as much, or magnets, pins. But one thing I want to chat about is how it impacted my social life. Saying no has always been a difficult boundary for me to enforce, but in 2025, I really tried to turn down a lot of social invitations that I couldn't afford, and that was a very humbling experience. Thankfully, I think most of my friends understand the position I'm in, and they're very generous at times, but it does result in a lot of FOMO, and sometimes it just feels a bit embarrassing. Like, it's definitely an ego thing. I'm really glad that I was able to start saying no to invitations if I couldn't afford it, just for my own peace of mind. On the contrary to this, I don't actually feel like my social growth has stunted at all. I feel quite the opposite due to all of the events I was tabling at. I legitimately met so many people last year. I'm way more open and comfortable to hanging out with people that I don't know. I definitely still have a small social battery as an introvert, but I feel way more value in my friendships and more empathy for other people. It's been so wholesome meeting other artists at markets and online, and like bringing those relationships or like those friendships outside of that context, so becoming like real friends that can open up and hang out with each other. I don't know. It just makes me feel really happy. I also think the best way to counter this whole thing with the frugality is mainly just doing low-cost activities and spending time in people's homes and just using what I already have. I have so many art supplies and so much clutter that I would love to share with people. I want to speak about one more challenge I faced last year, which came and went multiple times, and it is the very typical imposter syndrome that I'm sure we all experience. There were more than a few times last year where I was constantly comparing myself to other artists and small business owners who I felt were doing much better than I was, and I was just making myself feel like a failure. It's a really debilitating feeling that would leave me very unproductive and pessimistic. I had to learn up how to put boundaries, know when to stop scrolling, and to look for things that would actively encourage me or inspire me to get me out of that mindset. So I took a lot of breaks from social media, specifically Instagram and the art side of YouTube. It definitely feels like a balancing act because I'm constantly trying to make content for those things, but sometimes I just need periods of disengaging for my mental health. I feel like I've made steps forward on my artist and small business journey at my own pace, and that's all I could really ask for. You know, you never really know what someone's going through, like behind the scenes of another business, another artist, another person, whatever, because there's always going to be someone who's doing better than you and someone who looks up to you because they're not doing as well as you. It doesn't ever have to be a competition, and that's a good reason to practice being kind, not to just other people but also to yourself. But let's wrap it up on a positive note and talk about my plans for this year. Let's go back to that mind map that I mentioned earlier. For my small business goals, firstly, I still want to do markets this year. I think I've almost nailed my market preparation process, so I don't think they'll take up as much time as they did last year. But in saying that, I'm not sure if I want to increase the amount of markets I'm doing. I know a lot of artists do events full time, but I think that increasing the amount of markets I do will just cause me to burn out quicker because they are very exhausting. I feel like I'd just be playing catch up with my other projects. There are also so many artists these days that I just can't really guarantee that I'll get into any events. The other idea regarding markets I have is to apply to a larger variety of markets. Like I know some artists do tabletop or gaming events, collector events, medieval fairs, oddity type of events, that kind of thing. Although that's something I need to think more about. I want to try and build up some other revenue streams. So right now I have a focus on YouTube, but it takes me a really long time to publish videos because I need a break in between them. So I'm hoping I can make my workflows and editing more efficient. That could mean shorter but more frequent uploads, less experimentation, and more straightforward editing. I'm not entirely sure yet. It might just even include getting better at doing voiceovers or scripting like I'm trying to do now, or even just expressing myself in front of the camera, like learning how to talk better, and I can't even think of the word now. That's really ironic. Anyway, I also want to make a bigger variety of videos and most likely less market-focused content this year. Another thing I want to do is learn how to do more digital marketing, learn about like SEO and all that, but also how to make short form videos. I've never really gotten the hang of them. I feel like the short form storytelling is really different from long form. I'm starting to enjoy the process of editing short form videos, but I'm finding it really hard to maintain views or like get interaction using short form. I don't really like some of the trending short form content styles, so it's something that I have to think about or like brainstorm, I guess, try to figure out how to add value to those videos as well. I don't really have many plans for my online shop except to keep my catalog up to date and start using Pinterest to try and direct people to it. There's so many shipping hurdles right now. The courier I used also suddenly shut down without any warning. In terms of products, I have 2 new types of products that I'm already in the process of making. Last year I made my Field Notes of Fiction and Magical Bookmark collection. This year I really want to lean into making specific types of collections that are more than just aesthetically pleasing. So I want to create products and designs that are more interactive, collectible, customizable, hopefully offers like a bit more value for customers. I have a lot of ideas for this already, so I'm excited to see where they go and how many I can realistically like make. Another thing I want to try, which I have not mentioned publicly anywhere, I really want to start a mail club this year. I know there's already so many mail clubs and it's kind of like a trend right now, but I already have an idea that I'm like really attached to. I just need to find time to make it. And I think this is definitely a more stable form of income for artists, which is probably why it's very popular right now. It's not as exhaustive as making something like a Patreon membership where you also need to create more content for it. So I definitely see the appeal of it, and maybe I'll even make a YouTube series about it. Lastly, one of my small business goals is to finish the relaunch I'm doing for the Honey Mustard Club, specifically the online store. We're making progress on that, so I'm very optimistic about it. I have a lot of little goals for this brand as well, but I won't really go into detail about them since I'm already making a video series about the Honey Mustard Club rebrand. Let's talk about some art goals as well, because all of those were just small business goals and I would still like to primarily also be an artist. Towards the end of last year, I felt like I was starting to find my like preferred art style, but I do feel that my technical ability as an artist is quite low compared to others, especially considering how long I've been making art for. I don't really know if I can make this a big priority this year, but it is something that will be in the back of my mind. You know, hopefully I can find some spare time to improve my technical skills and to develop my visual library of drawing references so I can improve my art and make art quicker. I also want to start including more horror themes in my art. Nothing scary, nothing explicitly disturbing. I just like the idea of drawing cryptids, maybe like folk horror but still cozy, maybe cute fan art of horror franchises I enjoy, that kind of thing. So no jump scares or anything like that. Probably something more akin to like Over the Garden Wall or Stranger Things or Gravity Falls. So still pretty family friendly but like a little bit mysterious and spooky. I rarely make art like that, but I really enjoy it when I do, so it's something I want to lean into more this year. On the topic of shifting subjects in my art, I'd also like to learn how to draw more natural environments and scenery while still kind of like maintaining my own art style. I think this would give me a good excuse to be outside more, which ties into one of my personal goals for the year as well. Finally, let's talk about some financial goals. I would like to try and make more revenue than I made in 2025, obviously. I don't want to put a number out there, but I have one in the back of my head that is probably a bit unrealistic. As long as it's an increase from last year, I think that's a good thing. The goal is to just be improving each year, and that's really all I'll say about it. I honestly find it amazing that I was even able to make that much money just from my own art and my own products. Like, it's still such an exhilarating feeling to me, and hopefully it'll go higher in the future so I can put back more money into it and make even cooler things for everyone. I don't know, I'm excited thinking about it. On that note, I also do want to mention that I think I would like to get a part-time job this year. It's been a very slow journey trying to find one, but the financial stress is a lot for me. Just not having a consistent income. I would love to have just a low stakes part-time job that I can do without having to take home any work. Honestly, if I could just find something that could cover my rent, I'd be like so happy. I also feel like it would put structure back into my life. And despite the negative feelings I had at my past roles, something I've realized is that working or like regular employment has always fueled my creativity and passion more, because I'm always thinking about what I want to do when I'm away from work. Not having any employment last year, I had to learn self-motivation, which is still a daily struggle. There were definitely times where I got really lazy and just didn't want to do anything. So I think that getting a part-time job would also help me appreciate what I'm building for myself. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I know it's a very long one, but I do hope that you find it helpful. Being able to work on my small business and art practice full-time for over a year now has really been a dream come true. Again, I hope this was more of a realistic insight compared to what you usually see online. I'm very privileged to be able to do this with so much support. I think all the struggles so far have been 100% worth it, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. If you want to follow my journey, I do try and document as much as possible here on YouTube, and I also post new art on my Instagram whenever I make some, so I hope to see you again soon. See you in the next one. I really hope all of that footage was good because I don't want to record more. Talking head videos is so hard. Like, look how cute my setup is, and then I have just this glaring light on me, which makes me look purple. Hope I can edit that.